What you'll be learning today is how to create compelling characters from the inside out. And this is really the way I recommend people create characters. I found reading other blogs, listening to other story coaches, a lot of times you're told to focus on more of the external stuff, like what is your character's favorite color, or what powers do they have if you're writing fantasy, or like, what kind of skills do they do, what's their job. But I don't really think that's going to get you to crystallize your character in such a way that you know them from the inside out, that you understand the way that they see the world. And we're going to talk about why that is just so important. So let's dive right in. So today, we're going to talk about the one shortcut that helps you make incredible characters in minutes, the why and the lie, what it is and why it's essential for creating characters. We're going to discuss want versus need, which some of you may have heard already, and why your character needs both of them, the single piece of backstory that you need, and what a super objective is and how it really crystallizes your character. So first, what makes a character compelling in the first place? Well, a compelling character is sympathetic, which is different than likable. I find with a lot of my writing coaching clients, they want to make their character pretty much next to perfect because they're afraid that people won't like them or put down the book otherwise. But that's actually not true. Likable is different from sympathetic. There's plenty of really horrible characters who are still sympathetic and who you still care about. People like Walter White from Breaking Bad or Don Draper from Mad Men are the most common examples. A compelling character is also nuanced, which means that they have layers. They don't act the same way all the time. There's different elements to them. They're flawed, so they're not perfect. They have issues, they make mistakes, they act like regular humans. And finally, compelling characters are active, which means they go after what they want. Few things are worse than having a passive character who just has things happening to them throughout the story. You want your character to have a goal and to chase it. So I recommend you do the following process that we're about to go through for all of your POV characters, not just your protagonist. If you're writing a character with multiple main characters, do this for all of them. And I also even recommend you do it for your antagonists because it will really help you down the line. So the why and the lie. So the most common problems I see when it comes to my writing coaching clients is the protagonist has no defined personality, and therefore they're kind of bland as boiled chicken. They don't really have a personality to speak of at all, and we don't want that. B, the character has no defined personality, and so they swing wildly from one extreme to the other. In one situation, they might be happy. In a very similar situation later on in the book, they might be super angry and completely out of character. But because they have no personality, like anything goes. They pretty much act whatever way the story demands that they act. And we don't want that either. C, I find stories where the protagonist doesn't have a unique personality. And so you have multiple characters talking and acting the exact same. And again, we don't want that. We want unique, compelling characters where everyone has their own personality, their own idiosyncrasies, and they feel real and jump off the page. So the first thing we really need to dive into is your character's why. So to build a three-dimensional character, you need to get to the heart of who they are. You need to get to their soul, to their core. In order to do that, you need to understand the way your character sees the world. The problems we talked about in the last slide, where you have characters with no defined personality or wildly swinging from one extreme to the other, tends to happen because the author has no idea why their characters act the way that they act. They don't know how the characters see the world. And so basically they just guess or do whatever the story demands. But as you're about to see, that there are certain key factors that determine a person's beliefs, the worldview, and the course of action. These are your character's whys. You don't need to know everything about all of our characters. You just need to know a few really important move the needle elements that make a big difference in character creation. And these factors that we're about to talk about in a minute determine a person's beliefs, their worldview, and the course of action. So the first step before we get into the lie is I want to tell you about a really cool shortcut. And I happened to just stumble upon this while doing research on something totally different. So one of the really hard parts of creating characters and why it tends to take so long and be so confusing is because it's really hard to just create an entire personality from scratch. What if you had a foundation to build upon? That's when I stumbled upon something called the Enneagram. And I don't want you to get scared off by the new agey name. It's not like astrology. The Enneagram is a system of social psychology. And it basically says there are 9 core types of people in the world. Uh, and it doesn't encompass the entirety of a person's personality. It's mainly focused on how this person thinks, how they view the world. And particularly, it drills down into each type's core fear, core motivation, and core values. Um, and these are pretty much the 3 places that you want to start when it comes to creating your character, because these are the things that have the greatest impact on how your character sees the world and on how they think. So there are 9 different types, and each of them kind of have their own thing. Like, number 1, the reformer. They tend to be really concerned with being good people and making sure everyone else is good people. Type 2, the helper. They're always trying to help people. They're really big on self-sacrifice and altruism. Type 3, the achiever. They're really big on success and achievement, and they're very image conscious. Type 4 tends to be the artsy, more brooding type. Type 5 is really stuck in their head, and they really spend a lot more time in their own internal worlds than they do interacting with the regular world, and so on and so forth. If you want to learn more about all of these different personality types, I highly recommend the website EnneagramInstitute.com. It's great because it breaks down what each type is, their core motivation, core fear, and core values. It also talks about how these different types act when things are going well for them and when they're growing as people, and when things are going poorly for them and when they're really becoming worse people. It'll also tell you how the different types interact with each other. Like if a 9 and a 1 have a relationship, how that's going to work, what problems will arise, and what their strengths together are. So highly recommend that website to get started. So really the first step when it comes to creating your character is picking your character's Enneagram type. Read through all the types, and whichever one speaks out to you, we tend to have at least a vague idea of who our characters are before we start consciously building them. So pick whatever one fits best, and then you can move on to the next step. But first, I want to give an important caveat and an example. So for this example, we're using the type 2. Like I said, they tend to be the really helpful altruistic type. Their core fear is being unwanted and unworthy of love. Their core motivation / desire is to feel loved, needed, and appreciated. You also then see these type of people as, nurses, teachers, though not always. They can also be CEOs or music teachers. Their values are altruism, self-sacrifice, generosity, friendliness, and helpfulness. But there's a flip side to all of these different types. There's the good values that they have and kind of the ways that those values bite them in the butt. And so the type 2 can also be self-righteous, hypocritical, and pretty people-pleasing, which obviously can be an issue. But I want to give a caveat as well. 2 people of the same Enneagram type will not be identical. This is really, really important. Sometimes when I give this hack to writers, they're like, oh no, but this is going to create a cookie cutter story, or all my characters are going to talk and act the same, because there might be people of the same type. Multiple people might be the same type in my book. But that is not true. You can have 2 people of the same Enneagram type who are wildly different. I've even noticed this in my real life. I see people who are the same type, but who you would never guess are the same type, really, unless you know them really well, because they act wildly differently. So for this example, we're going to use Joe and Tracy. So Joe here, he's like a yuppie financial analyst. He only wears, as you see, the color blue. And music tends to give him a headache. He's kind of curmudgeonly. But then you have Tracy. She's the same type, but she's a nursing student. She's from the wrong side of the tracks and very proud of it, and she's obsessed with the guitar and music in general. So as you can see, the more superficial details, the career, likes and dislikes, all those kind of things can be different. And a person of the same type will just be driven by the same thing. So all type 2s are driven by the same thing, which is their fear of being unwanted and unworthy of love, their motivation to feel loved, needed, and appreciated. These are the things driving them, even though they may act differently. Because obviously a person's personality is also informed by their background, by their parents, by the people they grew up around, and a whole bunch of other things. So you don't have to be afraid if you make 2 characters the same Enneagram type, you don't have to be afraid that they're going to be clones of each other. That's not really the way it works. And that's why I love this system of psychology. This book I highly recommend. It's called Personality Types, Using the Enneagram for Self-Discovery by Don Richard Russo. I love it because it goes super in depth. It's awesome for creating characters because it goes really in detail. It tells you basically how these different personality types came to be, what happened when they were younger that maybe caused them to develop this kind of personality, super fascinating, and it will speed up the character creation process like nothing else. I'm telling you, the whole reason this framework works, where you can create characters in as little as 15 minutes, if you choose, is because of this one cheat code that pretty much no other writers know about. I've never heard another writing coach, another editor, another writer talking about this. So you guys are in on a really big secret that pretty much nobody knows about, and it's incredible for creating characters. So I introduced this as the why and the lie, and that's because they go hand in hand. So now we know what our characters' core fear, core motivation, and core values are. But now we have to figure out what is the lie that they believe. So all we are, every single person, it's just the stories that they believe. And your character, too, should be telling themselves certain narratives in their head, right? So for some people, the narrative that they might tell themselves over and over is like, true love doesn't exist. True love doesn't exist, or I'm unworthy of love. For someone else, they might keep telling themselves, you're only valuable if you're super successful in life. You're only valuable if you're successful. And they keep repeating that to themselves over and over again, whether they realize it or not. And it informs the way they view the world. So you have to identify what is the number one story that your character is telling themselves, the one narrative that dominates all the others. This right here, this number one story, will be the lens through which your character sees the world. That's why the lie is so important and why it's really the second step in this framework. Super important to start off with this right after you pick the Enneagram type, because the lie is, I can't emphasize it enough, it's the lens through which they view the entire world, and it will affect every other step from here on. So there's a twist to the story. The story that the character is telling themselves isn't true. It's a lie. And so K.M. Wiley says it this way, and I love this quote. Your character is incomplete on the inside. He's harboring some deeply held misconception about either himself, the world, or probably both. So stories are about change, right? They're about transformation. Your character has to start off one way and they should end up another way. But if your character is completely whole and fulfilled and has no problems in their life in the beginning of the story, then there is no story. The whole journey that they should be going on is they should start off feeling unfulfilled and having some issues. And whether they know it or not, those issues are caused by the lie that they believe. That story that they keep telling themselves over and over again that isn't actually true. So the character's journey is going from having this hole within themselves and having this distorted view of the world to going to a very holistic, very healthy view of the world and feeling fulfilled and whole on the inside. So it's a journey of internal transformation. So as an example, I decided to use Pixar characters for one, because Pixar, they're really masters of story structure, and I highly recommend you study those movies if you want to get better at writing stories. But also, these are movies everybody has seen pretty much. So here's Woody, one of my favorite Pixar characters. His lie is that I'm only valuable if I'm Andy's favorite toy. And this makes a lot of sense when you think about the events of the movie. He gets really threatened when Buzz Lightyear comes and takes his spot as Andy's favorite toy. And the real reason he's jealous of Buzz is because he feels like he has no value if he's not the favorite. He feels like he's worthless. And that really is what drives his insecure actions throughout the story. So then there's Joy from Inside Out, which is another great story. And she believes happiness is the only valuable emotion. So she ends up treating sadness in the story really poorly for most of the movie because she doesn't believe sadness is valuable. She believes all it does is bring people down and make people sad. And there's no use for that. And so that's why she does her selfish actions throughout the story and ends up pretty much messing everything up. So once you have figured out what your character's lie is, and spend as much time creating the lie as you want to, it could be pretty much anything, but it should be informed by your character's values, their core motivation, and their core fear. Pretty much everything should be, and that's why that's so important to start off with. But once you have the lie, then it's time to dive into want and need. You may have heard this before. K.M. Wiley talks about it a lot in her books, which I highly recommend. They're awesome. But these are really essential aspects to your story. So they're both connected to the lie. The lie plays out in your character's life and your story through the conflict between the thing he needs, the truth, and the thing he wants, a perceived cure for the symptoms of the lie. So let me break down this quote for you. So the lie is basically this distorted narrative that the character's telling themselves, right? And so it's causing certain problems in their life. It's the reason that they're unfulfilled or not whole, even though at the beginning of the story, they're not going to realize that yet. So the character's lie is going to inform the thing he wants. So he's going to want something to try to fix all these problems and all these holes that he has inside himself. But what he really needs in reality is not a tangible thing. It's not that promotion or that award or whatever he wants with a capital W. Is actually what he needs is to have an epiphany and a realization of the truth. And we'll talk about what the truth is in just a second. So the want is basically the main story goal, and the lie is the root of the want. I'll repeat that because it's so important. The lie is the root of the want. Whatever the character wants, whatever they are going after throughout the course of the story, should be something that they think will basically make them happy. And people are like this in real life. Oh, if I can just get that new car, all my problems will be fixed. If I can just get, some money, all my problems will be fixed. If I can just get that new house, all my problems will be fixed. And this is what your character needs to, the way that they need to think too. So they think, oh, if I just get this one thing, then my life will be whole. Then I will be whole. Then I will be happy. And the want to be anything tangible. And I really like the way, I forgot to put his name, but Aaron Sorkin, one of the best screenwriters of all time, really puts it down this way. Somebody wants something, and something is standing in their way of getting it. They want the money. They want the girl. They want to get to Philadelphia. Then the obstacle to that has to be formidable. And the tactics they use to overcome that obstacle are what shows us the character. So the want is basically the basis for the entire story. The story is about the character going after what they want, but it's going to end up being about them realizing what they need, right? So it starts off with the character going after what they want, and it will end with the character going after what they need. But you need to start off with the want because that's basically going to be the basis of your plot. And will create a great opportunity for you to throw some obstacles in the character's way that shows the reader who that character is. Oh, by the way, this is what some people call the main story goal. I prefer the term want versus story goal because story goal to me sounds vague and can mean a lot of different things. So for the duration of this training, we're going to call it the want. Now, what the character needs in reality is the truth. They don't need the promotion. They don't need the girl. They don't need the award. They need the truth. And the truth is just the direct opposite of their lie. So if their lie is, I'm unworthy of true love, then the truth might be, I need to learn to love myself. If the want is, or the lie, sorry, not the want, the lie. If the lie is, oh, I will never find true love, or I'm unworthy of love, then the truth would be, oh, I really need to learn to love myself. For Woody, the lie was, I'm only valuable from Andy's favorite toy. By the end, he realizes the truth, which is that I need to have worth in myself and not be so insecure and petty, basically. So the character must satisfy their need in order to be healthy, stable, and whole. They think the want is what will make them healthy, stable, and whole. What will really get them there is satisfying their need. And most of the time, the need can just be an epiphany or a realization that what they believe this entire time isn't true. It's a realization that the lie is, in fact, a lie. So KMY then says, he, referring to the character, will invariably have to come to a point where he's willing to sacrifice what he wants in order to secure what he needs. Sometimes the story will have to end on that bittersweet note of interior gain and exterior loss. But other times, once the character has embraced the thing he needs, he will then be all the more empowered in his pursuit of what he wants, allowing him to harmonize both his inner and outer goals in the finale. And that's a great way to think about want and need. Want is the outer goal. It's the external goal. It's what they're they're trying to find fulfillment in something outside of themselves. That's why it has to be something tangible, like an award, a girlfriend, a house, a promotion. versus the thing he needs is his internal goal, his inner goal. And that's really what's going to fulfill him. So what she's talking about here when she says sometimes the story will have to end on that bittersweet note, interior gain or exterior loss. Think about the Disney movie Cars, where Lightning McQueen, he really wants the race. He wants to win the Piston Cup. That's his want. That's his want. He wants it really, really bad. He thinks that's what's going to make him happy. But then, through a series of unfortunate events, he ends up in this backwater town where he meets real friends and real people. And then he realizes that there's so much more to life than winning. And that's the truth. That's the truth that he needs to realize. And by the end of the story, he realizes that, and he actually does not win the race. So it ends on a note of interior gain and exterior loss, because he satisfies his need, which is realizing there's more to life than winning, but he loses what he wants, which is the Piston Cup. So this is all to say, by the end of the story, the character must get to a point where they're at least willing to sacrifice what they want for their need. Whether or not they do end up having to sacrifice it, that's up to you as the author. But they must get to a point, particularly around the climax of the story, this is typically where this happens, they must get to a point where they're willing to sacrifice what they want to get what they need. And that's, the transformation that's at the heart of storytelling. So let's dive into the ghost. I really like this part. It's something else that K.M. Wiley is big on. And I wanted to put this in here because the way most people approach backstory is kind of counterintuitive. It doesn't really do what they want it to do. So one of the first pieces of advice we get when you look up how to create a character or how to create a compelling character will tell you to come up with the character's backstory. The problem is so much of backstory is unnecessary. You do not, as the author, need to know your character's entire life up until the point of the story. Nor does your reader. Your reader definitely doesn't want to hear about every event that's ever happened to your character. That's going to bore them to death, and it's a quick way to get them to put it down. The ghost is the single most important piece of backstory. It's the piece of backstory that forges a connection between the reader and the character. And it's really the only piece of backstory you need. So the ghost is a very bad thing that happened to your character. I call it the one trauma that rules them all, for any Lord of the Rings fans out there. So the ghost is often kept secret from other characters and the audience until the big reveal. So the way this works is there's just one very bad thing that happened in the past. You drop little hints and foreshadow what it is throughout the story, giving the reader some cookie crumbs to follow. And then finally you have the big reveal where you have the flashback, where you have the character talking about what happened to them, and you get to know the very bad thing that happened to them in the past. But a lot of people stop there. They'll just have the one thing, the one trauma that comes out, around the midpoint or whatever, and that's it. That's fine. But what really gives the ghost power is when the ghost is the direct result of the character's mistake, or the character blames themselves for the very bad thing that happened. So as an example, this example I used a couple times in this series, in this training, because it's a fantastic series. In Avatar: The Last Airbender, there's this thing called the Avatar. The Avatar basically has all the powers. There's 4 different powers he can have, but he has all the powers. And he's reborn, he's reincarnated after each Avatar dies, and he's the only one in the story who has the chance to save the world. The problem is, because of something the Avatar did, his name is Aang, because of something Aang did, he ended up being frozen in ice for 100 years, and the world really, really suffered for it. And so he feels so terrible about this, and really what drives his actions throughout much of the series, because it's not just, I disappeared for 100 years. It's my fault that I disappeared for 100 years, and I feel really bad about that. And so that's really going to give the ghost a lot of juice, a lot of emotional impact, and it's really going to be what makes the character very sympathetic and what gives context to a lot of their actions. So you can also, this is a quote from John Truby, you can also think of the ghost basically as the hero's internal opponent. It's the greatest fear that is holding him back from action. Structurally, the ghost acts as a counter-desire. The hero's desire drives him forward, his ghost holds him back. And The ghost is very connected to the lie. The ghost is actually, so the lie is the root of the want, the ghost is the root of the lie. This very bad thing that happened is the reason your character has this distorted view of the world in the first place. And we'll talk about a concrete example in just a minute. But the ghost is really the reason that your characters start telling themselves this narrative. If it's I'm worthy of love, and that's the lie that they keep telling themselves, it might be because, they were about to get engaged to the love of their life, and then they found out that she cheated on them with their best friend. And now they believe that they're unworthy of love and will never find love again. So the ghost directly causes the lie. The lie directly causes the want. So it's really a linear line here. K.M. Wiley says, the bigger and more destructive the lie, the more shocking and impactful the ghost should be. Or to flip that on its head, the bigger the ghost, the bigger the lie, the bigger the arc. I just think that's the absolute best way to put it. The bigger the ghost, the bigger the lie, the bigger the arc. So if you want your character to have a huge transformation, which by the way, you don't have to. How much your character transform, how damaging his lie is, all that is up to you as the author. But if you want your character to have a really big dramatic arc, and you want them to have a huge transformation from beginning to end, you should have them have a big ghost, like something really bad that happened, a big lie, a really distorted view of the world, and therefore they will have a bigger arc. So after you have all of this down, it's time to really crystallize your character and really figure out, not only, now you know how they view the world, you know the most important piece of their backstory. You know what they want and what they're going after. You also know what they really need in order to get the happiness and fulfillment that they so desire. But there's one missing piece, and this is something else that I basically made up as part of my proprietary framework because no one talks about it. And I think it's probably one of the most important parts of character development. And I call it the super objective. Don't bother looking it up because I made it up. It's a term I coined myself. And this is really going to change your approach to creating characters. So the super objective is not what your character wants, but it's how they intend to get it. So I'll repeat that because it's a little counterintuitive. The want is what the character wants, but the super objective is exactly how they intend to get what they want. And the super objective must be an action verb. It must be very specific, and it must be correct for that particular character. So as an example of a super objective, let's use Aang as an example again. Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender. What he wants is to save the world. He wants to bring peace and balance to the world. That's what he wants. But his super objective, how he's going to get it, is he's going to defeat the Fire Lord. And the Fire Lord is basically the big bad guy who wants to take over the world, as in many stories. So the want for Aang is saving the world. But how is he going to do that? Specifically by defeating the Fire Lord, something only he specifically is capable of doing. So it's easy to get the want and the super objective confused. Please don't. It will really muddle your character arc. Again, the want is the what, the super objective is the how. So I want to show you how you can do all this in Dabble. So you can go into your document, go into the story notes, and in that you can create a character profile. So for this example, I'm using Zuko, who's one of the villains from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And what you can write down is exactly what we talked about today. The Enneagram type, the core motivation / desire, the core fear, the core values. Then dive into their lie, what they want, what they need, their ghost, and their super objective. And when you do it this way and you create a character profile and have all the information organized just on one sheet in Dabble, which makes it super easy to keep track. Whenever you're wondering, what would my character do in this situation? Or how should they react to this thing that happened. You can just return to your character sheet, return to your character profile, and you, in an instant, get a complete picture of their entire personality and psychology. And that's why this framework is just so powerful. It can be organized in a very simple way, and you can just return to it whenever you need it. And it really tells you not everything about your character, because you don't need to know everything. It tells you the most important elements to your character and how they interact with each other. So let's do, this is an example character profile. And this is Zuko, the villain from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I want to show you, I created my entire novel writing framework, not only from like working at some of the top literary agencies in New York City, not only by being mentored by New York Times best-selling authors, but I also analyzed hundreds upon hundreds of stories. My Google Drive is full of spreadsheets and beat sheets saying, what happened in the story, when it happened, when all the different character moments are. And the reason I say that is because I want to show you that good stories tend to have all these elements. That's the thing that really makes this framework special. You can apply it to stories that already exist, and the good, powerful stories that have an emotional impact will always have these elements in their characters. So Avatar is widely considered one of the best shows of all time, and Zuko is possibly the most iconic character from that show. So I'm going to be using him as my example here. And this is something I just wrote just from watching the show. I was able to figure out what all these different things are. So he's an Enneagram type. He's a type 8, a challenger. And if you read just a little bit about the challenger, or just really hear the name, it becomes crystal clear why this is his type. His core motivation, like all type 8s, is to be self-reliant, to be in control of his life and destiny, to be important in his world. And if you've ever seen the show, like, this should ring very, very true. His core fear is being harmed or controlled by others. This is why we even see he's really mean to his mentor, who's his uncle, who's always there for him and really loves him to death. He treats him like trash for most of the story because he does not like being controlled. He does not like taking orders. He likes doing his own thing. His core values are decisiveness, confrontation, confidence, assertiveness, and determination. His lie is that only capturing the Avatar, which is the world's only hope for peace, will restore my honor. So he's really big on honor, and he thinks only capturing the Avatar will be able to redeem him. His want is to return home and win his father's love. His need is to follow his conscience and forge his own destiny. Notice how the need here is the opposite of the lie. His lie is only capturing the Avatar will restore his honor. But his need is that he actually needs to follow his conscience and then basically restore his own honor. His ghost, the whole reason he believes capturing the Avatar will restore his honor is because when he was 13, he was burned and banished by his own father, who was the Fire Lord, the king of the entire bad guy nation. He was burned and banished by him for speaking out of turn, and that really messed him up for the rest of his life and distorted his entire view of the world. His super objective is to capture the Avatar. And I want to show you this because I want to make a couple important points. One is, notice how the wants and the super objective are different. A lot of people watching the show would say that Zuko's want is to capture the Avatar. That's not quite true. He's not capturing the Avatar just because he loves being a bad guy. He wants to capture the Avatar specifically because he wants to win his father's love again. And his father's approval is pretty much what he lives and dies for. He plans on winning his father's love by capturing the Avatar. So what he wants is to return home. How he's going to return home is by capturing the Avatar. So that really illustrates the difference between the want and the super objective, again, so you don't get them confused. And if you take a look at this character profile, you'll see that basically everything fits together. Everything is consistent and coherent. Everything makes sense. So his lie is directly, you can see how that's directly caused by his ghost. We can see how his want is directly connected to his lie. We can see how his need is directly connected, is the opposite of his lie. And we can see how all the stuff on this side of the character profile is very much in line with his core motivation, his core fear, and his core values, right? And if you watch the series, which I recommend you watch at least one episode just so that you can actually see this in action, you can pretty much tell all of this after watching it for 5 minutes, because the writers did that good of a job of really drilling down and crystallizing who he is as a person.